Students, in this video I'm going to talk about early modern Japan. And so we begin around 1500 with the Kyoto Shogunate at a period of weakness. It's struggling to control the daimyos, who are the local warlords in Japan. And so you have a period of division and a period of chaos, and then in 1603 Tokugawa, I'll get better at that as I go along. Tokugawa Yeshao establishes the Tokugawa Shogunate. And maybe I get half credit for those efforts. But this credit is actually, this shogunate, is actually one of the most stable in Japanese history. He forces the daimyos to give him hostages, and his successors follow this practice. So this means that the local warlords have to remain at least somewhat obedient to the shogun. Otherwise, their relatives who they've been forced to give as hostages will be killed or otherwise maimed. Part of the reason the Tokugawa Shogunate rises to power is because of increased interaction between the West and Asia. They use Western weapons that they've achieved from trading with the West to control the daimyos and to gain control over Japan. Nevertheless, as time goes on, the shogunate becomes more and more insular and rejects European involvement and European trade. This changes in the mid-19th century, around 1853, as the Western nations, this time led by the Americans, increasingly insist on having trading access to Japan. This makes the Tokugawa shogunate look weak, and in 1867 they are replaced by a new dynasty, the Meiji. The Meiji, M-E-I-J-I. Very interesting group, because they basically recognize the need to industrialize and westernize Japan. And so they break the power of the daimyos and establish a centralized government. They begin to establish an industrialized Japanese economy, and unlike the Chinese, the capital they use to create the factories and the industrialization in Japan comes from local business leaders rather than from foreigners. China tries to industrialize as well, but they find that Europeans have so much control of the capital that it's not actually enabling them to be independent of European forces. And so we see Japan becoming more and more westernized during this period. This brings us to Korea, which is always kind of stuck in between China and Japan. Under the Qing dynasty, they are forced to acknowledge the supremacy of China, the sovereignty of China. Qing dynasty from Manchuria, which borders on Korea. This means that this Chinese dynasty is going to have a great interest in controlling Korea. And then towards the end of the 19th century, when they've achieved some independence from China, as centralized government in China starts to break down, we find that they are defeated by the Japanese. And this is the beginnings of the emergence of Japan as a world power led by the Meiji. They've decided that they don't only have to copy the West in terms of a government and in terms of industry, they also need an empire as well. When they look around the rest of the world, they see that what enables a country to retain its independence, it's by having a supply of raw materials from colonies that you control that feed your industry. And so the takeover of Korea is the beginnings of the creation of a Japanese empire, which will exercise an important influence on Asian history in the 20th century, which is what we'll explore next week.